in the previous lesson, we started getting acquainted with JSX. And I mentioned that one of the benefits of JSX is that it gives us the full power of JavaScript and all the automation that that entails when it comes to writing chunks of our user interface. So let me give you some examples in this lesson of how we can harness basic features of JavaScript and combine them with JSX. This is code that once again might look a little bit weird, just like our original return value. But remember, anytime you see JSX and you get confused, just imagine it being a JavaScript function call under the hood. So for example, when you see something like this, just imagine that this is some kind of function that is executing to create an HTML element on the page, in this case, an H1. Right? So it goes all the way down. Obviously, if you have a div with a header, it's going to be multiple function calls. But just imagine that this is just some kind of function call that is generating this HTML on the screen eventually. So here's the cool part about JSX. It works the same as any other data type in JavaScript. So for example, compare it to something like a number. If you have a number, you can of course assign it to a constant or a variable. It turns out you can do the exact same thing with JSX. So right here, I can create a const like title and simply assign it to this JSX, right? This is totally valid syntax. Similarly, if I want another constant to represent, let's say, the subtitle of my page, here I can create that constant. I'll call it subtitle. And right here, let's make that an H2, and I'll write something like welcome, right? So anything that you can do with JavaScript data types like numbers or strings or booleans, you can also do with JSX. So for example, I can store my two constants in an array. I will have an array of JSX elements. So for example, right here, maybe I'm trying to model my web page. So I might have a constant called web page that will be an array of elements that I want to render in order. Well, I can simply say that I want to render my title and then a subtitle, let's say, and we can store these JSX pieces in an array, right? Totally valid when you remember, once again, that this is just some kind of function that's evaluating to produce a return value. Totally valid if this was a regular function and we could just store its return value as the first element in an array. So JSX is no different because this is just evaluating to a JavaScript function under the hood. Right? Similarly, we can store JSX as, for example, object values. So right here, I might instead say maybe web page as object, and here I will define a JavaScript object, and using ES6 shorthand syntax, I'll have the object have title and subtitle properties, and now I'm going to have a JavaScript object with two properties, and each one of those properties is holding a piece of JSX, a small piece of the user interface, a fragment of our UI, right? So these are just some basic examples, but they should hopefully start to demonstrate that working with JSX is really no different than working with your basic JavaScript data types. It can be a little bit weird because it's new and it's specific to React, but it's actually pretty cool. We can almost think of this as taking the pieces of HTML and allowing them to interact with JavaScript and getting all the benefits of, for example, naming chunks of HTML or storing pieces of HTML or even replicating pieces of HTML, right? If you can imagine this web page array as being what we render onto the screen, imagine how easy it would be to render another H2 with the same content. Well, all I have to do is, for example, add another subtitle to this array, and now we could repeat this same bit of content onto the screen while keeping it referenced by the same constant subtitle, right? That's the whole reason why we use constants in code, right? So we can reference the exact same value over and over again without having to write it out. And we could do the exact same thing with JSX. Obviously, with a small H2, the benefit might not be that apparent, but imagine that this was a more complex chunk of JSX like this one below. It can be JSX that starts off with a top-level element that nests three other elements that each nest three other elements. Well, it's as easy as simply copying a constant that references that chunk of a UI in order to replicate it. So once again, we're getting all the benefits of JavaScript and a programming language, but when working with user interface features. So even if this idea isn't perfectly clicking yet, I'm hoping you're starting to get the idea of how this can really make our UI design very powerful, because we're going to be able to leverage all the programmatic features of JavaScript to build up user interfaces. We're still proceeding very slowly, but we're going to take it step by step and continue showing you how this powerful JSX paradigm from the React team truly did revolutionize the web development process and make it super simple and much quicker to build up this dynamic web page that we see in our browser. All right, that's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I will see you in the next one.